In World War II, American engineers designed a tank so underwhelming, their own army didn't even want it. Stamped as rejected and left in the shadow of Germany's feared armor, it was never supposed to matter. But on the battlefield, something unexpected happened. How did a design once dismissed as a failure end up outsmarting Germany's best tanks? This is the story nobody saw coming. In the early years of World War II, long before American armored forces fully understood what they would face in Europe, Germany was already revolutionizing modern warfare. The Blitzkrieg tactic, fast, coordinated advances using tanks, aircraft, and mechanized infantry, shocked the world. As panzer divisions swept across Poland, France, and later the Soviet Union, one reality became undeniable. The United States had fallen behind in armored design and doctrine. By 1941, American engineers were scrambling to catch up. The U.S. Army had tanks, yes, but most were lightly armored vehicles meant for infantry support rather than tank versus tank combat. Meanwhile, German machines like the Panzer IV, and later the Panther and Tiger, were setting new standards for firepower and protection. Under this pressure, a controversial debate emerged surrounding a new American tank design, one that many dismissed before it ever had a real chance. This design was labeled unnecessary, impractical, and even unrealistic for American doctrine. Internal evaluations criticized it harshly, calling it unlikely to provide meaningful improvement. For that reason, the project was shelved, placed behind designs that fit traditional U.S. military thinking. Yet history would reveal something ironic. This rejected concept would eventually become one of the most important innovations in American armored warfare. To understand why, we must look at U.S. tank philosophy at the time. Unlike Germany, which saw tanks as the core of offensive strategy, American planners believed tanks were mainly for infantry support. The responsibility of destroying enemy armor fell on specialized tank destroyer units, not the tanks themselves. This doctrine influenced everything from armor thickness to gun caliber. Because of this mindset, any design proposing heavier armor or a more powerful gun was seen as excessive. But when American forces finally faced German tanks directly in North Africa, Italy, and later France, they discovered that doctrine didn't survive contact with reality. Reports of Sherman struggling against Panthers and Tigers pushed the army to reconsider older, unconventional proposals. Suddenly, that rejected design seemed far more relevant than anyone had predicted. The tank at the center of this story began not with a grand vision, but with a group of engineers exploring ideas ahead of their time. The design included thicker frontal armor, a more spacious turret ring, and an engine layout optimized for reliability rather than speed. Most importantly, it allowed for the installation of a larger, higher velocity gun. At the time, these features seemed unnecessary, even wasteful. Early tests weren't promising. The engine overheated, the turret rotation felt stiff, and evaluators criticized the tank as overbuilt. Many argued it solved problems the U.S. Army didn't have. Ironically, those exact problems, firepower, survivability, and long-range engagement, would soon become the defining challenges of American tank crews in Europe. Meanwhile, German armor was evolving rapidly. By 1943, the Panther arrived with thick sloped armor and a deadly high-velocity 75mm gun. The Tiger followed, equipped with the iconic 88mm cannon capable of knocking out Allied tanks long before they could fire back. While American tanks were reliable and easy to maintain, they were often outmatched in direct combat. The Sherman, the backbone of U.S. armored forces, was never meant to duel heavy German armor. Yet battlefield circumstances forced it into exactly those engagements. Soldiers reported shells bouncing off Panther hulls, long-range ambushes by Tigers, and situations where maneuverability alone couldn't compensate for inferior firepower. Change was inevitable. As battle reports poured in, American officials revisited the previously discarded tank design. Suddenly, its thicker armor and more powerful turret ring were no longer flaws, they were advantages. Engineers reopened the blueprints, re-evaluated the engine configuration, and re-examined armor distribution. The design that once seemed too ambitious was now the Army's best hope for countering Germany's armored supremacy. When development resumed, the tone was completely different. The Army now demanded better protection and bigger guns. Engineers strengthened the turret mechanism, improved cooling systems, and modified the hull to support heavier ammunition. The upgraded gun mount was the most important change, finally capable of supporting weapons strong enough to defeat advanced German tanks. Not everyone agreed. Some officers still clung to outdated doctrine, insisting tanks shouldn't focus on fighting other tanks. But battlefield realities made these arguments feel increasingly disconnected. Reports from Normandy described Panthers destroying Allied tanks from over a kilometer away. Reports from Italy spoke of Sherman crews firing multiple rounds with no effect. The evidence was too strong to ignore. Under growing pressure, the Army approved the redesign. Factories retooled production lines, instructors rewrote training manuals, and crews were rushed through familiarization courses. What had once been an unwanted concept was now a priority weapon for the rapidly approaching European battles. Comparisons with German tanks became a national obsession among engineers, officers, and soldiers. Could this redesigned machine survive a head-on encounter with a Panther? Could it outmaneuver a Tiger? Photographs from testing show officers closely examining ricochet marks, penetration tests, and armor angles. The tension wasn't just technical, it was personal. The lives of American tank crews depended on these decisions. Behind the scenes, a shift was taking place. The United States was discarding its outdated doctrines and embracing a more flexible, reality-based approach to armored warfare. And the once rejected tank was becoming a symbol of that transformation, an embodiment of adaptability, engineering courage, and the willingness to challenge old assumptions. As the redesigned American tank neared readiness, Allied planning for the invasion of Europe was reaching its final stages. Engineers and commanders knew that once troops landed in France, they would face some of Germany's strongest armored units. The timing couldn't have been more critical. The new tank needed to be shipped, tested, and deployed in record speed, a logistical challenge that only added to the pressure on everyone involved. Crews selected to operate the tank were a mix of experienced Sherman veterans and newly trained recruits. For the veterans, the heavier, more powerful machine felt like a leap forward. For the recruits, it was an introduction to a very different kind of armored warfare. Training emphasized long-range engagement, coordinated movement, and exploiting the new tank's improved firing stability. Many soldiers described the experience as finally having a fair chance against German armor. The first units equipped with the new tank arrived in Europe quietly, without the dramatic fanfare one might expect. There were no big announcements or front-page photos. The tank rolled off landing ships and railcars with a kind of understated confidence, an unspoken promise that perhaps things were about to change. Even so, many soldiers approached it with cautious optimism. Years of hearing how formidable German armor was had shaped expectations. In workshops along the front, mechanics gathered around the new tanks with curiosity. They checked the reinforced suspension, examined the turret ring, and studied the engine layout. Compared to earlier American designs, everything felt stronger, sturdier, and more battle-ready. Yet the real test would not come in the motor pool. It would come on the muddy, unpredictable fields of Europe, where theory often collided with reality. As Allied forces pushed deeper into France, stories began spreading among frontline units about a new American tank that was outperforming expectations. Reports described instances where the tank held its own against German armor, even at challenging angles or longer distances. Soldiers were careful not to exaggerate. No tank was invincible. But it was clear that something had changed. For the first time in a long while, American crews felt the momentum shifting. The first major encounter between the redesigned American tank and German heavy armor took place during a series of engagements in rural France. The exact location varied depending on the unit, But one consistent theme emerged. The tank's upgraded gun and reinforced armor fundamentally altered the dynamic of the fight. German crews, accustomed to having the range advantage, suddenly faced an opponent capable of returning fire effectively. One of the earliest reports described the scenario in which an American tank platoon spotted a pair of Panther tanks positioned hull down behind a ridge. Under normal circumstances, this would have been a difficult engagement. But this time, the American unit advanced deliberately, using available cover and coordinating their fire. When the lead tank fired, the crew watched in astonishment as the shell struck the Panther's frontal plate and penetrated. Moments of disbelief passed before one crew member reportedly said, "So this is what it feels like to have the upper hand." These encounters were not without risk. German optics remained superior, and their crews were highly experienced. But the American tank's improved firepower allowed it to engage without relying solely on flanking maneuvers. By holding firm at medium range, U.S. forces could counterattack more effectively than ever before. This shift in capability changed not only tactics, but also morale. Crews no longer felt they were entering an unwinnable fight. Another engagement occurred in a narrow French valley where a Tiger tank was positioned as a defensive anchor. Historically, facing a Tiger head-on was something American crews tried to avoid whenever possible. Yet the redesigned tank advanced methodically, relying on its stabilized firing platform and faster reload cycle. The battle was tense, drawn out, and demanding, but it proved something crucial. The new design could survive long enough to fight back, and sometimes, survival was the deciding factor. Word spread quickly among German units as well. Reports described an American tank with unexpectedly strong frontal armor and significant firepower increase. It wasn't fear that defined these reports, but concern. The comfortable advantage German crews once held was fading, and commanders understood the implications. Every battlefield became less predictable. As more American units received the upgraded tank, it became clear that its role was evolving. What had begun as a limited deployment for specific missions soon expanded. Commanders discovered the tank excelled at supporting infantry pushes, countering armored threats, and holding strategic ground. Its ability to deliver precise fire while absorbing punishment made it invaluable in complex engagements. The tank's reliability also proved to be a major asset. Unlike some of Germany's newest designs, which were powerful but mechanically temperamental, the American tank consistently performed across long distances. It could be repaired quickly in the field, resupplied with ease, and integrated seamlessly into combined arms operations. This predictability gave Allied forces a practical advantage that extended beyond pure firepower. One commander wrote in his after-action report that the redesigned tank provided a level of stability and effectiveness that changed the complexion of the battlefield. That statement captured what many soldiers felt. Instead of relying on speed or maneuver alone, they now possessed a machine capable of meeting German armor on more equal terms. This psychological shift helped reshape Allied strategy. The tank also demonstrated exceptional performance in defensive operations. In several instances, American forces successfully held back counterattacks from German armored units, something that had been more complicated with earlier designs. By anchoring key terrain with these more durable tanks, Allied units could maintain pressure, reinforce breakthroughs, and exploit gaps more efficiently. Overall, the new tank didn't dominate the battlefield through overwhelming superiority. Instead, it achieved something more subtle but equally powerful: balance. German armor was still dangerous, but it was no longer the singular threat it once had been. The battlefield was leveling out, and with that shift came opportunities the Allies had been waiting for. The turning point for the once rejected American tank came during a critical phase of the Allied advance, when German commanders launched a counteroffensive designed to halt the momentum of the push toward their borders. This counteroffensive involved some of Germany's most experienced armored crews and several of their strongest tanks, including Panthers and a handful of Tigers held in reserve. It was here, on a landscape of rolling hills, narrow tree-lined roads, and small farming villages that the American tank would face its ultimate test. The battle began with German forces attempting to punch through a gap in the Allied front. Their movement was swift and coordinated, exploiting fog and early morning shadows. Several American infantry units were forced to fall back, reporting the advance of multiple heavy tanks and armored vehicles. The message traveled quickly up the chain of command, and reinforcements were rushed to the area, including a battalion equipped with the redesigned American tank. The atmosphere in the American command post was tense. Maps covered the tables, radios crackled constantly, and officers spoke in low, urgent tones. One phrase kept appearing: "We need something that can hold them." For months, German armored thrusts had been difficult to stop once they gained momentum. Now the Americans hoped the new tank could buy them the time and space they needed. As the American battalion approached the threatened sector, they could hear distant artillery and intermittent bursts of tank fire. The crews knew they were heading into a confrontation unlike any before. Some of the soldiers later recalled the eerie quiet between the sounds of battle, the feeling that the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for steel to clash against steel. The battalion commander positioned his tanks along a ridge overlooking a valley where German forces were expected to advance. It was a calculated move. The elevated terrain gave the Americans a clear line of sight, but it also meant they would be among the first units spotted. Still, the commander trusted the new tank's range, stability, and frontal armor. For the first time, he felt they had a realistic chance of meeting German armor without immediately being at a disadvantage. Visibility was limited when the Germans first appeared. At first, the American crews saw only movement branches swaying, faint engine noise, a flash of metal through the trees. Then, slowly, dark silhouettes emerged, Panthers, multiple of them. Moving in a tight formation, their long-barreled guns pointed forward with practiced discipline. Even from a distance, their presence carried an undeniable weight. The American commander gave the order to hold fire until the Panthers crossed a faint dirt road at the base of the valley. Every tank crew waited, hands resting on controls, eyes fixed through optics. A sense of anticipation filled the air, part fear, part adrenaline, part hope. This was the confrontation everyone had talked about, argued about, and prepared for. The moment finally came. One of the Panthers reached the road, then another. The commander raised his hand, then dropped it. Fire! The first American shell streaked across the valley and struck the lead Panther squarely on the hull. The explosion sent dust and debris flying. For a moment, no one knew what had happened. Then the Panther lurched, smoke rising from the point of impact. It didn't explode dramatically, it simply stopped. Disabled. The shot had penetrated. A wave of disbelief rippled through the American crews. For so long, they had been on the receiving end of long-range engagements, but now the roles were reversed. The second American tank fired, then a third. Each shot carefully aimed. Each one delivered with confidence that hadn't existed before. The new tank stability and upgraded gun made a remarkable difference. The Germans reacted quickly. The remaining Panthers spread out, seeking better angles. Their guns roared back, sending high-velocity rounds toward the American ridge. The ground shook with every impact. Several American tanks were hit, some sustaining damage that forced them to fall back. But crucially, the redesigned tank's frontal armor absorbed hits that would have disabled earlier models. One American gunner later described the moment as the first time I felt like we weren't just trying to survive. We were actually fighting on equal ground. He remembered seeing tracer rounds streak through the air, hearing the calm commands of his tank commander, and feeling his heart race as he lined up shot after shot. As the fight intensified, more German tanks appeared, including one Tiger I positioned on a slight rise. The Tiger's presence changed the entire mood of the battle. Its silhouette was unmistakable, large, imposing, and armed with the dreaded 88mm gun. Even the American crews who had confidence in their new tanks felt the tension rise. A Tiger on open ground was a serious threat. The American commander adjusted his formation, ordering 2 tanks to shift slightly left to prevent the Tiger from gaining a flanking shot. The Tiger fired first. Its round slammed into one of the American tanks, knocking it out of the fight. Smoke filled the air as the crew evacuated. Despite the loss, the remaining tanks held their positions. It was now a duel of nerves and precision. The Tiger, certain of its superiority, attempted to pick off the Americans one by one. But the redesigned American tanks used a combination of terrain, stabilization, and coordination to maintain pressure. They maneuvered just enough to disrupt the Tiger's aim, but not enough to expose their weaker side armor. Then came the decisive moment. One American tank, positioned slightly higher than the rest, found a critical angle on the Tiger. The gunner exhaled slowly, calmed his shaking hands, and fired. The shell crossed the battlefield and struck near the Tiger's turret ring, a vulnerable point. The German tank shuddered, then stopped moving. A stunned silence filled the American radios. Not because the Tiger had been hit, that had happened before, but because it had been hit cleanly, deliberately, at medium range, in a controlled exchange of fire. It proved that the new American design, once dismissed, could stand up to the most feared tank of the war. The remaining German units realized the attack was faltering. Without the Tiger anchoring their formation, they began to withdraw, choosing to preserve their remaining vehicles rather than risk total loss. The Americans did not pursue recklessly. Instead, they held the ridge, maintaining discipline and consolidating their defensive line. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield told a story no doctrine could deny. Several German tanks lay disabled or abandoned. American losses existed, but they were fewer than expected, far fewer than earlier battles involving heavy German armor. The once rejected tank had not only survived, it had played a decisive role in halting the dangerous enemy advance. News of the engagement spread quickly across the front. Crews who had doubted the redesign now spoke of it with newfound respect. Officers who once preferred lighter tactics began requesting more units equipped with the new tank. And German commanders, reading their reports, acknowledged the presence of a new and formidable American armored threat. This moment, this single clash between once rejected American engineering and Germany's finest armor became the turning point. It wasn't the largest battle of the war, nor the most famous, but it was the moment the psychological balance shifted. For the first time, both sides understood that the battlefield had changed. In the hours following the battle, engineers and intelligence officers arrived to examine the disabled German tanks. What they found reinforced just how significant the engagement had been. The penetrations on Panther and Tiger armor weren't lucky shots, they were clean. Deliberate strikes made possible by the upgraded American gun and the tank's improved stability during firing. For the first time, analysts could confidently document that American tank firepower had reached a level capable of neutralizing Germany's most advanced machines under real combat conditions. The American crews, exhausted but energized, gathered near their tanks as the sun dipped behind the hills. They spoke in quick exchanges, trying to process what had happened. Many were surprised by how well the tank had held up under direct fire. They had entered the battle believing they would have to fight defensively, maneuvering constantly to avoid German guns. Instead, they had stood their ground and traded shots with confidence. One tank commander recalled watching a Panther round hit the frontal armor of his tank. The impact shook the entire vehicle, but the armor held. He said the experience changed everything, because it showed that survival was no longer a matter of luck, it was a matter of engineering. This realization gave crews a renewed sense of purpose, strengthening their trust in the machine that had once been dismissed as unnecessary. Meanwhile, German crews who survived the engagement reported their own surprise. Some described the American tanks as unexpectedly resilient and difficult to suppress. Their commanders noted that the Americans seemed more willing to maintain their positions, a behavior not previously common in engagements involving heavy German armor. The shift in American confidence was clear, and Germany took notice. Back at Allied headquarters, the battle report was read with great interest. Senior officers understood immediately that this engagement had implications beyond the local area. It meant that the redesigned tank wasn't just functional, it was transformational. It represented a turning point in the campaign, a sign that the Allies could challenge German armored dominance directly rather than relying on sheer numbers or air support. Despite the victory, the Americans knew the battle had been close. Some tanks were damaged, others needed extensive repairs, and ammunition supplies had run low. Crews worked through the night to prepare for the possibility of another counterattack. The sense of urgency never left the battlefield. Everyone understood that Germany, though weakened, was still capable of delivering powerful blows. As dawn approached, a thick morning mist settled over the valley. The terrain, still marked by the tracks of tanks and the impact of artillery rounds, felt strangely quiet. American crews waited inside their vehicles, watching for any sign of renewed German movement. Radios hummed softly as operators listened for intelligence updates. The mood was tense, but not hopeless. The Germans did attempt another push, but it was smaller, less coordinated. Their commanders were cautious now. They had lost several critical vehicles the previous day, and they feared encountering the American tanks again under similar circumstances. This hesitation gave Allied forces a chance to stabilize the line, fortify their position, and prepare a more organized defense. When contact was made, it became clear that the dynamic had shifted. German armor approached more cautiously, probing for weaknesses rather than charging with the confidence they once held. American crews noticed the difference immediately. The enemy seemed less assertive, more wary. It was as if the battle had shaken not just their tanks, but their assumptions. In one instance, a German Panther approached the ridge, only to halt abruptly when it spotted the distinctive silhouette of the American tank. Instead of pressing forward, it reversed behind cover. The American crew watching through their optics exchanged looks of disbelief. They had never seen a Panther hesitate like that. This change in behavior wasn't random, it was strategic. German commanders were attempting to reassess the threat, to understand how an American tank design they had underestimated could suddenly challenge their best armor. The psychological advantage Germany once held was slipping away. During a midday lull in the fighting, American officers held a brief planning meeting near the ridge. Standing next to their tanks, maps spread out on hoods and crates, they discussed how to capitalize on the enemy's hesitation. For months, Allied forces had been forced to adapt to German strengths. Now they had an opportunity to dictate the pace of battle. The officers agreed to push forward slightly, but cautiously. Their goal wasn't to break through immediately, at least not yet. It was to assert control, to make it clear that the ridge belonged to them now. The men returned to their tanks with renewed determination, ready to take the initiative. As the American tanks rolled forward, they did so with a confidence that hadn't existed before the redesign. Their movements were measured, deliberate, supported by infantry and artillery in a textbook example of coordinated warfare. The Germans responded cautiously, trading fire but rarely revealing their positions fully. The battlefield had become a chess match, one the Americans were now playing from a position of strength. Midway through the afternoon, the Americans encountered stiff resistance from a small group of German tanks dug in along the tree line. The Germans had selected a strong defensive position, hoping to ambush the advancing American force. It was a familiar tactic, one they had used successfully many times. But the redesigned American tanks approached carefully, using terrain for cover and relying on their improved optics to locate the enemy. The first exchange of fire favored the Americans. A well-placed shot struck a German turret and forced the crew to abandon the vehicle. As the remaining German tanks attempted to reposition, the Americans maintained pressure, firing steadily and carefully. It wasn't overwhelming force, it was precise, disciplined action. For several minutes, the fighting intensified. Trees swayed from the shockwaves of guns firing. Dust kicked up from the ground, and the characteristic metallic echo of tank rounds rang across the valley. Yet through it all, the redesigned American tanks held the advantage. Their combination of firepower, stabilized aim, and crew coordination proved decisive. Eventually, the German defenders began to retreat once more. Their ambush had failed, and they lacked the resources to mount another surprise attack. The American advance halted just short of the tree line, not wanting to overextend. They had achieved their goal. Not only had they pushed the Germans back, but they had done so with minimal casualties. By late afternoon, the battlefield belonged to the Americans. They held the ridge, controlled the valley, and had a clear view of any future German movements. Engineers moved forward to secure strategic points while infantry fortified positions. The victory was not just tactical, it was symbolic. The once rejected tank had proven itself beyond doubt. That night, American crews set up camp beside their tanks. Some sat on the hulls, others leaned against the tracks, sharing food and stories. There was a sense of quiet pride among them. They had faced some of the most feared tanks of the war and had not only survived but prevailed. As soldiers cleaned their equipment and reviewed the events of the past 2 days, many felt that something fundamental had changed, not just in the battle, but in the entire campaign. For the first time, they believed that the Allies could challenge Germany on equal terms in armored warfare. A mechanic working on one of the damaged tanks noted how easy it was to repair compared to earlier models. "This thing was built to last," he told a group of passing soldiers. "You can feel it in the frame, in the engine. It's the real deal." His words reflected a growing sentiment among the ranks. The tank wasn't just effective, it was dependable. The next morning, higher command visited the front lines to see the results firsthand. They inspected the tanks, questioned the crews, and examined the battlefield. What they saw confirmed everything the reports had indicated. The redesigned American tank had changed the equation. One general remarked that the engagement would likely influence future decisions about American armored development. He spoke of the importance of adaptability, the need to trust engineers when they pushed boundaries, and the dangers of rigid doctrine. His speech, though brief, resonated deeply with the crews who had lived through the battle. The impact of the battle extended far beyond the immediate area. News spread along the front, boosting morale across multiple units. Soldiers talked excitedly about the new tank, sharing stories and speculating about its potential in future operations. For many, it represented a new beginning, a shift toward a more balanced and confident armored force. German intelligence, for its part, took the news seriously. Analysts attempted to identify the tank, determine its weaknesses, and predict where it would appear next. They understood that failing to account for this new threat could have significant consequences. The battlefield was changing, and they needed to adapt quickly. Back in their headquarters, German officers pored over maps and reports, trying to understand how the Americans had managed to neutralize their heavy armor so effectively. Some blamed poor visibility, others terrain, and still others coordination. But beneath the speculation, there was a growing awareness that American tank development had taken a leap forward. In the days that followed, the American battalion continued to advance, though cautiously. They encountered pockets of resistance, but none as intense as the initial counterattack. Each engagement further validated the new tank's capabilities. It handled rough ground well, maintained accuracy over long distances, and remained reliable during extended operations. Crews grew more familiar with the tank's strengths and weaknesses. They discovered the optimal angles for deflecting incoming fire, the best ranges for engaging different types of enemy armor, and the most efficient ways to coordinate with infantry and artillery. The tank became not just a machine, but a partner, a trusted companion in the complex dance of battle. By now, stories of the tank's achievements had reached newspapers back home, though details remained limited for security reasons. Families wrote letters expressing pride and relief, grateful that American soldiers finally had equipment capable of matching the enemy's strength. The emotional impact of these victories was significant. For the American crews on the front lines, the increased attention brought mixed feelings. They were proud of their accomplishments, but mindful that the war was far from over. They knew that Germany still possessed formidable armored divisions, and that future battles could be just as challenging. Still, the psychological shift could not be ignored. Where once American crews approached German armor with caution bordering on fear, they now approached with determination. They respected the enemy, but they no longer felt outmatched. Confidence replaced hesitation, and strategy replaced desperation. This new attitude manifested in subsequent engagements. American crews were bolder with flanking maneuvers, more aggressive in holding key terrain, and more creative in using their tanks' capabilities. Instead of relying solely on numbers and support units, they incorporated the redesigned tank into flexible plans tailored to each battlefield. German commanders soon realized that the American armored forces were behaving differently. They saw increased coordination, greater precision, and more effective use of terrain. It was clear that the Americans were no longer reacting to German actions, they were setting the tempo. This shift in battlefield leadership had a cascading effect. As American forces grew more confident, they began pushing deeper into contested areas. Each small victory reinforced their momentum, creating a chain reaction that slowly eroded Germany's defensive capabilities. One of the most symbolic moments occurred when an American tank unit captured a strategic crossroads previously held by a German armored company. The position had changed hands multiple times, but this time, the Americans held it firmly, supported by the redesigned tanks that had become the backbone of their defense. Holding the crossroads allowed the Allies to redirect supply lines, resupply faster, and prepare for future offensives. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of the war, but a vital one. And at the center of it all were the tanks that had once been deemed unworthy of production. As the month progressed, the American battalion that had fought the pivotal battle became something of a legend among neighboring units. Soldiers visited their camp to see the tanks up close, ask questions, and learn from their experiences. The crew members, once ordinary tankers, were now respected mentors. Despite the growing admiration, the crews remained humble. They understood that their success was the result of many factors: good engineering, strong leadership, effective training, and a bit of luck. They knew that their role was to keep moving forward, to continue pushing until the war was won. During a rare moment of rest, the battalion commander gathered his men for a brief reflection. He spoke about the journey they had taken, from skepticism to confidence, from uncertainty to clarity. He reminded them that the tank's success was also their success, a testament to their adaptability and resilience. His speech ended with a simple message: "We were handed a tool they didn't believe in. We proved its worth. Now we'll use it to finish the job." The men nodded, understanding the weight of his words. They weren't just fighting a war, they were shaping history. The redesigned tank now appeared in strategic plans across the Allied front. Commanders requested it for upcoming operations, emphasizing its effectiveness in both defensive and offensive roles. Its versatility made it a favorite among planners who needed reliable assets in unpredictable conditions. Engineers continued refining the tank based on battlefield feedback. Small improvements were made to the suspension, the gun sighting system, and internal storage. These adjustments might have seemed minor, but they reflected a powerful dynamic, a constant, collaborative effort between designers and soldiers to adapt to the evolving battlefield. Germany, meanwhile, struggled to respond. Their heavy tanks remained formidable, but they could no longer dominate engagements with the same certainty. Each loss was harder to replace, each victory more costly. The psychological blow of facing an opponent who matched their strength was significant. As the American battalion prepared for the next major offensive, the men reflected on how far they had come. They remembered the early days of the war, when their tanks felt underpowered and vulnerable. Now they felt ready to confront whatever Germany had left. The redesigned tank, once overlooked and even dismissed, had become the centerpiece of a new chapter in American armored warfare. Its presence on the battlefield inspired confidence among Allied forces and caution among German opponents. It was no longer just a machine, it was a symbol. This transformation wasn't just about steel and engineering. It was about belief in innovation, belief in adaptation, and belief in the men who operated these powerful vehicles. The tank had been rejected once, but through persistence and necessity, it had earned its place. As preparations for the next offensive began, the battalion's tanks lined up in a long column, engines rumbling softly. The crews checked their maps, adjusted their radios, and prepared for the road ahead. They felt the familiar mix of nerves and determination. The horizon glowed faintly with the first light of dawn. The air was cool, crisp, and filled with the quiet promise of change. The American commander looked at his men and nodded. It was time to move forward, time to use the momentum they had created to push toward victory. The column rolled out, leaving behind the battlefield that had defined their turning point. Ahead lay new challenges, new dangers, and new opportunities. But for the first time, they moved with the confidence of knowing that they had the tools, the skill, and the resolve to face anything. The once rejected tank had proven not only its worth, but its destiny. In the weeks following the pivotal battle, the American High Command conducted a comprehensive review of armored operations. Reports from the front described not only improved performance, but a noticeable shift in how American tank crews perceived themselves. Where once there had been hesitation, now there was focus. Where uncertainty lingered, now determination took its place. And all of this traced back to a machine that had nearly been forgotten. The redesigned tank began appearing in intelligence briefings, war room discussions, and strategic forecasts. Analysts highlighted its ability to survive direct confrontations that had previously overwhelmed American armor. They emphasized its reliability, its improved handling of rough terrain, and its capacity to deliver precise, stabilized fire. These traits, once considered unnecessary for U.S. doctrine, were now the pillars of its effectiveness. Meanwhile, German commanders recalibrated their battlefield expectations. After years of possessing a near-automatic advantage in armored duels, they now recognized that American forces could match them in critical engagements. This shift forced them to rethink deployment patterns, scouting practices, and defensive preparations. What had once been routine was now unpredictable. German intelligence analysts attempted to reconstruct the tank specifications. They examined recovered shell fragments, interviewed captured soldiers, and studied the performance of disabled vehicles. Their assessments noted a significant improvement in American frontal protection and increased firepower consistent with heavier gun mounts. Although they did not know the exact details, they understood enough to recognize the tank as a meaningful development. On the American side, the success of the redesigned tank sparked a wave of innovation. Engineers returned to their drawing boards, studying battlefield feedback to refine future models. They explored improvements in turret rotation, suspension durability, and ammunition storage. The goal was not simply to create a stronger tank, but to establish a solid foundation for the next generation of armored vehicles. Production lines back home adjusted quickly. Factories that had been manufacturing earlier models shifted resources to support the new design. Workers on assembly floors took pride in knowing that their labor directly contributed to saving lives on the front. Some even wrote messages on internal components, short notes of encouragement never meant to be seen but deeply meaningful to those who installed them. American newspapers soon began publishing cautiously optimistic stories about improvements in armored warfare. While details were limited, reporters hinted at a new tank making a noticeable difference. Families of tank crews felt a measure of relief knowing that their loved ones now had equipment capable of surviving encounters with Germany's best machines. For the soldiers operating the redesigned tank, these public acknowledgments were reassuring but not distracting. They remained focused on their missions, understanding that much work lay ahead. Every mile gained, every position secured, and every counterattack repelled depended on discipline, preparation, and teamwork. As winter approached, conditions on the front became harsher. Mud thickened, visibility dropped, and roads turned treacherous. Yet the redesigned tank performed admirably. Its engine reliability allowed units to operate for longer periods without breakdowns, and its strengthened tracks handled soft ground better than earlier models. These traits proved essential in keeping supply lines open and maintaining momentum. During one particularly challenging stretch of operations, American forces were tasked with holding a key river crossing against potential German counterattacks. The redesigned tanks played a crucial role, forming a defensive perimeter that discouraged any large-scale assault. German scouts, observing the positions from a distance, reported the presence of the new American armor and recommended against engaging directly. This psychological shift, the growing reluctance of German units to confront American tanks head-on, was a significant departure from earlier stages of the war. It illustrated how battlefield experiences had rewritten expectations on both sides. Confidence had changed hands. American commanders seized the opportunity to push forward. They launched measured offensives supported by both armor and infantry, gradually recapturing towns and strategic locations. Each victory strengthened the belief that the Allies were no longer just resisting Germany, they were outmaneuvering them. In several engagements, German forces attempted to adapt by deploying anti-tank guns in concealed positions. But American crews, now experienced with the redesigned tank strengths, countered effectively. They used terrain creatively, coordinated with artillery, and relied on their improved optics to identify threats before committing to an attack. The synergy between infantry and armor grew stronger as well. Infantry units, no longer fearful that their supporting tanks might falter under pressure, advanced with renewed confidence. This cooperation accelerated the Allied advance and allowed for more ambitious operational planning. Within larger strategic circles, the success of the redesigned tank became a case study in the importance of flexibility. Military historians would later note that the tank's journey from rejection to battlefield triumph reflected a broader shift in American military thinking. War demanded adaptation, not adherence to outdated expectations. One high-ranking general remarked that the most important lesson was not in the tank's armor or gun, but in the willingness to revisit assumptions. He argued that innovation could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes the ideas dismissed as irrelevant were the exact ideas needed in a crisis. Back on the front lines, American tank crews continued to encounter German armor, but the battles took on a different character. No longer were they desperate attempts to survive overwhelming firepower. Now they were controlled. Methodical exchanges where tactical skill and coordination mattered as much as the machines themselves. In one notable engagement, American units advanced through a dense forest where German forces had established hidden defensive positions. The redesigned tanks moved cautiously, scanning for signs of movement. When German armor finally appeared, the Americans responded with calm precision. Their shots found their marks, and the Germans, unable to secure a breakthrough, withdrew. These consistent successes had cumulative effects. German units began conserving their tanks, using them more sparingly and retreating sooner to avoid unnecessary losses. This behavior further weakened their ability to mount effective counterattacks, contributing to a gradual but steady collapse of their armored strength. As the Allies advanced deeper into enemy territory, they encountered logistical challenges, including damaged infrastructure and harsh weather. Yet the redesigned tank continued to perform dependably. Its robust construction and ease of maintenance allowed crews to keep it operational even under difficult circumstances. Not every battle was easy. There were still moments when German forces launched determined defenses, and American units had to fight carefully to avoid being overextended. But with each engagement, the redesigned tank proved its worth by helping stabilize the front and secure key objectives. The tank's growing reputation also influenced Allied planning on a broader scale. Commanders began designing operations around its strengths, using it to spearhead armored thrusts, reinforce vulnerable areas, and support infantry in complex terrain. Its versatility made it a strategic asset rather than just another vehicle. Engineers continued to monitor the tank's performance, collecting data to improve future models. They focused on enhancing its mobility, refining its optics, and increasing crew comfort. These improvements aimed not just to win the current war, but to prepare the United States for whatever came next. By the time spring arrived, the redesigned tank had played a role in dozens of engagements across multiple fronts. Its presence was now expected, a familiar and reassuring sight among Allied soldiers. For many, it represented a turning point in the war, a symbol of resilience and innovation. German morale continued to decline as they faced both dwindling resources and increasingly capable Allied forces. Their once dominant armored divisions found themselves stretched thin, often forced to retreat or reposition before risking direct combat with the Americans. As the Allies broke through deeper into German-held territory, the tank crews recognized that victory was becoming increasingly likely. They continued to advance cautiously, aware that the enemy still had pockets of resistance and that some battles could still be costly. But the overall direction was unmistakable. One American tanker described the feeling as moving with history at our backs. Each mile covered was another step toward the war's conclusion, another reminder of how far they had come since the early days of the conflict. Civilians in liberated towns welcomed the American tanks with gratitude. Their cheers and gestures of thanks left lasting impressions on the crews, who often found themselves reflecting on the purpose behind their sacrifices. These moments of connection strengthened their resolve and reminded them that their efforts were part of something larger. As operations continued, the redesigned tank's role expanded beyond direct combat. It became essential for escort missions, logistical support, and even humanitarian assistance in liberated areas. Its reliability made it a dependable presence whenever stability was needed. Officers noted that the tank helped secure not only victories, but also trust among local populations. Its sturdy design and calm presence symbolized protection, helping reassure civilians that the advancing armies were there to restore order rather than disrupt it further. Even after months of deployment, the tank's mechanical performance remained excellent. Crews took pride in maintaining it meticulously, performing daily inspections and repairs to ensure it could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. The relationship between the crews and their tanks evolved over time. Many began to view their vehicles as more than machines. They were partners, guardians, and symbols of survival. This emotional bond strengthened the crew's determination to keep pushing forward. As the Allies approached the German border, German resistance stiffened once more. Tanks, anti-tank guns, and entrenched infantry combined to create layered defenses designed to slow the Allied advance. The Americans responded with coordinated operations that highlighted their improved capabilities. In several engagements, the redesigned tank proved crucial in breaking through fortified positions. Its ability to absorb hits while delivering accurate fire helped suppress enemy defenses and open paths for infantry and engineers. These coordinated efforts allowed Allied forces to maintain their momentum. Many crews described these operations as some of the most demanding of the war. The terrain was complex, the weather unpredictable, and the enemy determined. Yet the redesigned tank provided a level of resilience that made these challenges manageable. During one operation near a dense forest region, the tank battalion encountered a mixed group of German vehicles attempting to ambush the Allied column. Using careful maneuvering and clear communication, the Americans neutralized the ambush and secured the area. This engagement highlighted another key advantage of the redesigned tank: its ability to perform consistently under pressure. Even in unpredictable situations, it maintained stability and control, giving crews the confidence needed to adapt quickly. As more territory fell under Allied control, the German command structure became increasingly strained. Communication broke down, supplies dwindled, and coordination became harder to achieve. In contrast, American forces benefited from strong logistical support and well-maintained vehicles. The once rejected tank became a symbol of this contrast. Its dependability stood in stark opposition to the mechanical and logistical struggles faced by desperate German units. Each mile it advanced represented not just physical progress, but also the collapse of Germany's armored advantage. By the time the war neared its end, the redesigned American tank had earned a reputation as one of the most reliable and effective vehicles in the Allied arsenal. It seemed almost ironic that a machine once considered unnecessary had become a defining element of the final phases of the conflict. Tank crews reflected on their journey frequently. Many remembered the early days when uncertainty and doubt had clouded their missions. Now, as they looked back on months of progress, they recognized the incredible evolution they had undergone, both personally and professionally. Commanders praised the crews for their discipline, courage, and adaptability. They emphasized that while the tank played a crucial role, it was the crew's skill and dedication that brought out its full potential. This acknowledgement reinforced the strong bond between soldiers and their machines. As the final engagements approached, American forces prepared for one last push. They gathered intelligence, coordinated with allied units, and planned their movements carefully. The redesigned tank was assigned critical roles in these plans, reflecting its proven effectiveness. The crews performed their pre-mission rituals, checking every detail with methodical precision. They knew that although the war was nearing its conclusion, the upcoming operations required complete focus. Their tanks, though reliable, depended on their vigilance. On the eve of the final offensive, many crew members found themselves reflecting on the strange journey of their tank. How could something once overlooked become so vital? The answer, they realized, lay in the intersection of necessity, innovation, and determination. The redesigned tank had emerged as a testament to the importance of adaptability. It demonstrated that war demanded constant evolution, that the ideas dismissed one day might become essential the next. It was a lesson that extended far beyond mechanics. And at dawn, the final push began. Engines roared to life, treads gripped the earth, and the long columns of American tanks moved forward with purpose. They advanced through smoke, fog, and uncertainty, guided by experience and determination. German forces, weakened and overwhelmed, attempted to resist but lacked the strength for a prolonged defense. The American advance continued steadily, powered by the momentum built over months of hard fighting. The redesigned tank played its role flawlessly. It helped secure crossings, reinforce vulnerable positions, and lead assaults where necessary. Its presence reassured infantry, comforted commanders, and discouraged enemy forces. It had evolved into the machine it was always meant to be. When the final ceasefire was declared and the guns finally went silent, the tank crews sat quietly inside or alongside their vehicles. They reflected on the long road behind them, the battles fought, the challenges overcome, and the machine that had accompanied them every step of the way. The once rejected tank had not only survived the war, it had shaped its ending. In the days that followed the ceasefire, the American tank crews slowly transitioned from the intensity of combat to the quiet uncertainty of peace. Many found the silence unsettling. After months of constant movement, the stillness of the battle-scarred fields felt almost unreal. Their tanks, once symbols of tension and anticipation, now sat quietly among the ruins, their engines cold yet full of stories. Commanding officers began preparing reports, summarizing the lessons learned throughout the campaign. The redesigned tank featured prominently in these briefings, not as a footnote or supporting element, but as a central reason for several crucial victories. Its evolution from rejected prototype to battlefield cornerstone became a case study in the value of adaptive thinking. Historians and analysts who reviewed the reports noted the tank's success was not defined by superior firepower alone. It was the combination of gun performance, armor design, mechanical reliability, and crew adaptability that created its advantage. The tank did not excel in just one area, it performed well in every essential category, creating a balanced and dependable platform. The U.S. Army's Ordnance Department took particular interest in feedback from the front. They recorded crew recommendations regarding turret ergonomics, ammunition access, suspension durability, and radio placement. These insights formed the basis for post-war design improvements that would influence future generations of American armored vehicles. For the crews, however, these technical details were secondary to the emotional weight of what they had experienced. Many of them had developed a profound attachment to their tanks, seeing them as more than metal constructs. The vehicle had protected them, carried them, and provided a sense of stability in the chaos of war. One crew member described his tank as the most reliable friend I had out there. His sentiment was echoed by countless soldiers who felt a deep connection to their machines. They cleaned them thoroughly, even though the war was over. They checked the engines, tightened bolts, and maintained routines as if expecting to move out again at any moment. In the liberated towns, civilians began approaching the American tanks with admiration and curiosity. Children climbed onto the hulls, pointing at the long barrels and thick armor. Parents thanked the crews for bringing safety and relief. These interactions created moments of warmth that softened the harsh memories of the battlefield. Engineers back home analyzed captured German tanks and compared them to the redesigned American model. They noted that while German vehicles often featured superior optics or thicker armor in certain areas, they suffered from mechanical fragility and logistical complications. The American design, by contrast, demonstrated greater endurance and maintainability attributes that proved decisive during prolonged operations. This contrast highlighted a fundamental difference between the two approaches. German engineering had pushed the boundaries of performance, but often at the cost of practicality. American design, though initially conservative, evolved into something more balanced and forward-thinking. The redesigned tank embodied this shift, showing that adaptability could rival ambition. International military observers studying the aftermath of the campaign recognized that the tank's success had implications far beyond the war. Countries around the world began examining how doctrine, innovation, and battlefield experience intersected. Some nations modified their armored strategies, recognizing that flexibility and reliability were just as important as raw firepower. As American forces transitioned into occupation duties, the redesigned tank continued to play an important role. It helped secure roads, maintain order, and transport supplies. Its presence reassured civilians and discouraged potential unrest. Even in peace, the tank symbolized stability. Crews found themselves navigating a new kind of responsibility. Instead of preparing for battle, they were now ambassadors of security, ensuring smooth transitions in regions recovering from conflict. This shift required patience, diplomacy, and a different kind of discipline. Though the war was over, crews were encouraged to keep their tanks in operational condition. Workshops remained active, spare parts circulated, and maintenance protocols continued. No one knew how long occupation duties would last, and military planners preferred to remain prepared for any scenario. American soldiers often reflected on the irony of the situation. The tank that had once been considered unimportant was now indispensable, not just in war, but in ensuring peace. It had earned a reputation for reliability that extended far beyond battlefield performance. As the months passed, crews received orders indicating that some tanks would eventually be transported back to the United States for further study. Engineers wanted to examine how the vehicles had held up structurally over the course of the campaign. This news sparked mixed emotions among the crews. They were proud that their tanks would be studied, but they were also reluctant to let them go. One commanding officer described the moment his tank was loaded onto a transport ship as the end of an era. He stood quietly, watching the vehicle that had carried his crew through the war. It felt strange to see it lifted by cranes rather than moving under its own power. 167 back in the US, military schools began developing new training programs based on lessons learned from the tank's deployment. These programs emphasized adaptability, cooperation between branches, and real-time problem-solving. Instructors used battlefield accounts to shape future generations of tank crews. The tank's impact also extended to design philosophy. American engineers recognized the importance of building vehicles that could evolve quickly based on battlefield needs. They studied the redesign process closely, identifying key decisions and breakthrough moments that made the tank a success. These insights influenced not only American tanks, but also armored doctrines worldwide. Nations observing the war's outcome understood that flexibility could determine the success or failure of an armored campaign. The redesigned tank became a reference point for future innovation. Even as new designs began taking shape in factories and testing grounds, the influence of the once rejected tank remained visible. Its combination of balanced design principles and battlefield adaptability became foundational to modern armored development. For the tank crews returning home, the transition was emotional. They were welcomed as heroes, celebrated for their courage and resilience. Yet many found it difficult to describe what the war and the tank had meant to them. The bond forged between human and machine was something only fellow tankers truly understood. Veterans gathered in reunions, sharing stories about the battles they had fought and the challenges they had faced. The redesigned tank was always a central topic, how it had saved them, surprised them, and changed the course of their missions. These stories became part of an oral history passed down through generations. Museums and memorials soon requested surviving tanks to be put on display. Curators recognized the tank's historical significance and wanted to preserve it as a symbol of innovation and perseverance. These exhibits became popular attractions, drawing visitors eager to learn about the machine that had shaped the war's outcome. Engineers who had worked on the redesign were invited to speak publicly about the project. They explained how close the tank had come to being abandoned, how internal disagreements had nearly derailed it, and how unexpected battlefield demands ultimately revived it. Their insights offered valuable lessons in engineering humility. Military historians wrote extensively about the tank's journey. They highlighted the importance of questioning assumptions, the value of unconventional thinking, and the need to remain open to new ideas, even ones that initially seem impractical. The tank became a symbol not just of military power, but of intellectual flexibility. As time passed, the tank's story evolved into a broader metaphor. It represented resilience in the face of doubt and the ability to adapt in unpredictable circumstances. Teachers used it as an example in leadership courses, business seminars, and engineering programs. Its influence continued long after the war ended. New generations of tanks drew inspiration from its balanced design philosophy. Military planners incorporated its lessons into future doctrines, emphasizing adaptability, teamwork, and innovation. The tank's legacy also extended into popular culture. It appeared in documentaries, books, films, and video games. Audiences were captivated by its transition from rejected prototype to battlefield legend. Its story resonated across different mediums and generations. Veterans who had served in the tank continued to share their experiences with younger audiences. They described the fear, the uncertainty, the camaraderie, and the sense of accomplishment that came with mastering such a powerful machine. Their stories preserved the human side of the tank's legacy. In military academies, cadets studied the tank's design evolution as a case study in strategic adaptation. Instructors emphasized that the tank succeeded because it was built with an understanding of real-world conditions, not just theoretical expectations. As decades passed, restored versions of the tank participated in commemorative parades. Their engines rumbled to life once more, evoking memories of a time when their presence on the battlefield represented hope and determination. Historians emphasize that the tank's significance was not in being perfect, but in being adaptable. It had weaknesses, as all machines do, but its strengths aligned precisely with the needs of the battlefield at that pivotal moment. This adaptability created a legacy that transcended the war itself. Future tank designers recognized that flexibility, not rigidity, was the true foundation of battlefield success. Even today, scholars continue to analyze archived documents from the tank's development. They study field reports, design sketches, test data, and wartime correspondence. Each document helps complete a picture of how the tank overcame rejection, skepticism, and outdated doctrine. From these analyses emerged a powerful insight. Breakthroughs often come from ideas that challenge established beliefs. The redesigned tank was a testament to the importance of questioning assumptions and daring to experiment. For many military professionals, the tank's story became a symbol of courage, not just the courage of the crews who operated it, but the courage of engineers who believed in it despite resistance. Their persistence changed history. The tank's impact continued to shape strategic thinking around the world. Nations began developing armored forces inspired by its principles: balance, reliability, and adaptability. Its influence became global. In international conferences, military representatives frequently cited the tank as an example of successful mid-war innovation. It demonstrated that even in the midst of conflict, bold decisions could alter the balance of power. Students of military strategy studied the tank's deployment during key battles, analyzing how terrain, timing, and coordination amplified its strengths. These insights enriched their understanding of combined arms operations. As technology evolved, new generations of armored vehicles integrated advanced electronics, composite armor, and high-powered engines. Yet the essence of the once rejected tank remained present in every design. The belief that no machine is truly complete until it proves itself in the real world. Surviving examples of the tank were preserved meticulously by museums and private collectors. These restored machines became living reminders of the war's turning point, icons of a time when innovation reshaped the battlefield. When visitors approached these tanks, many were surprised by how large and imposing they still appeared. Their steel hulls bore scratches, dents, and faded paint marks of service that spoke louder than any museum plaque. Some visitors placed their hands on the cold metal, imagining the sounds, the vibrations, and the emotions felt by the crews who once operated them. The connection was powerful, bridging decades through the tangible presence of history. For historians, the tank story became an enduring reminder that breakthroughs often emerge from unexpected decisions. The willingness to revisit a rejected idea had changed the trajectory of a global conflict. For engineers, it became a symbol of perseverance. They saw in its design a testament to the value of refining, adjusting, and challenging preconceived limitations. For veterans, it represented survival. It was the partner that carried them into danger and brought them home again. They saw in it not just a weapon, but a guardian. For the world, it became an emblem of turning points, proof that even in times of darkness, adaptation and resilience could pave the way toward victory. Even as new wars emerged and new technologies were developed, the story of the once rejected tank remained relevant. Its lessons echoed across generations of leaders, engineers, and soldiers. It stood as a reminder that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs emerge from ideas no one initially believes in, ideas that need only the right moment, the right pressure, and the right courage to reveal their true potential. And so the tank that began as a forgotten proposal, dismissed, underestimated, and nearly abandoned, ultimately reshaped the course of armored warfare. Its legacy endures not only in steel and history books, but in the hearts of those who fought with it, learned from it, and were forever changed by its presence. In the end, the story of this once rejected American tank design became a testament to the power of adaptation and the unpredictability of war. What began as an overlooked blueprint ultimately evolved into a machine that reshaped battlefields, lifted soldier morale, and challenged Germany's most formidable armor. Its journey proved that innovation often emerges in the moments when it's needed most, and that a single decision, choosing to revisit an idea instead of abandoning it, can alter the course of history. For the crews who fought in it, the tank was more than steel and engineering. It was a lifeline, a trusted companion, and a symbol of resilience. Their courage and determination breathed life into a design that many believed would never see combat, transforming it into a legend whose impact echoed far beyond the war. And long after the final ceasefire, the tank's legacy continued to remind future generations of the importance of creativity, teamwork, and the willingness to challenge expectations. If you enjoyed this story and want to explore more incredible moments, innovations, and untold events from the past, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support helps bring more historical journeys to life, so together, we can continue uncovering the stories that shaped our world.